Hi, I'm Kirsten Detrick, Chief Commercial Officer of Endpoint Health. It's a pleasure to be here with you to talk to you on the topic of partnerships. It's one that you're going to see is vitally important to the future growth and sustainability of your organization. It's going to impact probably every person in your company, and it's something that you as the CEO are going to be absolutely involved with. Let me share my screen and we can get started talking about the topic in a little bit more depth. Partnerships are tricky. You know that from your personal life, from all the businesses that you may have already been associated with. They take patience and time and communication, collaboration, and did I say patience? All of that means that when you have two organizations full of people with their own interests, their own desires, their own objectives, working together to build a partnership between the two entities, it can get really, really messy. So my objective today is to share with you some wisdom, some insight that I've gleaned during my near 30 years of experience in the biopharmaceutical world. I've worked at major companies like Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, Takeda. I have led or been involved with numerous partnerships, and they've been partnerships between entities of two equal sizes. They've been partnerships of big and small. They've been everything in between. And what I can share with you is that planning and being open-minded and also being really clear in what your objectives are and your strategy is critical to developing a successful partnership. I think it was Sun Tzu who said that the essence of strategy is choice. The truth is that about 90% of the drugs in the marketplace today came from much smaller organizations. It takes about $3 billion to get a compound to market. And unfortunately, very, very few compounds ever actually make it from the lab through clinical trials all the way to approval, much less critical commercial success. And when large pharmaceutical organizations are looking at your company to assess it for a partnership, they're thinking a couple of things. They're going to be assessing you for the scientific uniqueness of your idea. They're going to look at it to see how big the potential patient population will be. They're looking at it in similar ways that you've probably looked at it when you're first starting. But they're also going to add one other level of investigation. They're going to think very clearly about whether it's important to invest in your company now or later, because investing early is highly risky. They know that, and you know that. Investing later is a lot more expensive for the big pharma company. It certainly brings you a lot more revenue as well in partnership bucks, but it can also be tougher to ink those deals. It's basically, from the point of view of biopharma, a race to get to the scientists with the best ideas, and preferably as late as possible before anybody else discovered them. So for your perspective, what you're doing is you're trying to trade off a lower value deal today, where you will lock in financing for your ideas from a larger organization, versus waiting, holding off, and de-risking that idea on your own dime, but knowing full well that a pharma company might be more interested in it later. Your job as CEO is to balance the burn rate, dilution issues, the scientific risk, all over the timeline of your company. It's the CEO's most important challenge when you're first starting out, and it's something that is really tough and tricky to manage. The truth is that the vast majority of biopharma blockbusters came from somewhere else. Here you see two major manufacturers, well-known companies, and every single one of these multi-million dollar, almost billion or more dollar assets came from an alliance, a partnership, an acquisition. These are not homegrown products, and big pharma knows that. There are so many different partnerships out there. Every partnership is different. Make sure that your strategy drives your deal structure. You might, for example, be looking just for a straight up investment and equity position that you want to get from the venture capital arm of a large biopharma. Perfectly legitimate choice, very arm's length transaction. It's basically you convincing them that they should give you financing so that you can continue to work on the scientific discovery or development of your dreams. Sometimes maybe you'll be interested in doing a joint venture. That's something where two entities of equal size, equal heft, equal resources, although different resources, come together to make 1 + 1 =, let's say, 5. You might also be working to discover, develop, or even develop commercialization plans with a partner via maybe it's an alliance or some other structure. Sometimes you're going to take numerous elements of the life cycle of an asset and you're going to bring them all together, and you and the partner will do all of those stages together. For example, something called a co-development and co-promotion deal, where the scientists from both partners work together, and then the commercial people and the marketing and sales and access people work together as well once the drug has achieved regulatory approval from regulatory authorities. There are many different flavors of partnership, and the key thing is for you to keep in mind which one works best for you and the entity that you're trying to entice to come to the negotiation table. Success rates, as it turns out, differ dramatically depending on whether or not a biopharma is invited to the table and is partnered or working with or somehow involved with a smaller entity. Over here at the right side of this table, which is really the amalgamation of 15 years of data, what you see in the light blue is the success rate, which is defined essentially as FDA approval, maybe an IPO, possibly an acquisition of a molecule that was sourced from a smaller organization. And you see, sorry, in the light blue, you see the success rate when large pharma is involved. And in the dark blue, you see the success rate when large pharma is not involved. These numbers are stunning. What this tells you is that basically it's twice as likely to get an IPO, an acquisition, or an FDA approval when you look outside of your smaller organization's boundaries and look toward biopharma help and involvement. And what might also surprise you is that the valuations you get when biopharma invests are nearly 2 or even 3 times higher when you've got this kind of a partnership that is out in the public domain. People know about it, they're interested in it, they're intrigued by it, they're impressed by it. On the left-hand side, you've got market cap, and on the right-hand side, you've got acquisition value. And these are the median numbers for startups with and without large pharma investors. Clearly, getting that kind of partnership going or collaboration attracts more investment, attracts more capital, and is something that drives a nice set of inflection points for your company, which is what you're looking for as you seek to grow faster and faster. So what really is the goal here of a partnership? Basically, it's a win-win for everyone. You want to make sure that first and foremost, you're thinking about patients, because that's why you got into this in the first place. Patients benefit when you have partnerships because they get faster drugs, they perhaps get better care options, and quite frankly, they get better characterized options as well, where the safety and efficacy might have been researched even more deeply because of the insights brought to the table by a larger organization. Your company benefits because obviously you get financial resources, but you're also going to get access to people who have done this before, sophisticated researchers, sophisticated commercialization experts, people with real business experience who have probably launched not just 1, 2, or 3, but maybe more blockbusters into the marketplace. You're also going to get publicity because, let's face it, you're looking to make your organization seem even bigger than it is. And there's nothing like that does that like getting hooked up with another organization that has a name brand value to it. Well, what do they get out of it? They probably are looking for innovative assets because the hunt is on to find compounds to fill large pharma's pipelines. They get fresh perspectives. They get to see talent. They also get the publicity of working with a scrappy startup. And they also might even get efficiencies across functional areas or therapeutic areas. Your investors, well, what do they have in store for them with a partnership? They're actually going to grow even more the confidence that they have in your proposition. They might be able to start looking for an exit. They're also probably potentially looking for a rationale for increased investment. Ultimately, their investment is going to be de-risked when they see some larger partner come to the table. So when do you consider a partnership? When do you start it, and why and how? Well, here are some thought starters for you. First, you have got to know yourself better than the partner ever will. You really need to understand what are your specific, defined, measurable, short and long-term business goals. And you really need to take a clear eye to how viable is it that you're going to achieve those goals on your own. Asking yourself questions like, what would additional resources, and I'm not just talking about financial resources, but what could I do if I had different, more experienced, perhaps talent? What would happen if I had maybe faster turnaround times because I have more people working on a project with me? All of these resources could propel you forward faster. The question you've got to ask is how fast, and is it worth it to give up what you'd have to give up in a partnership for that speed or perhaps that different perspective? Your financial situation will dictate an awful lot of your decision making. What are the implications that you have in store for you if you do partner up? And what happens in all of the possible permutations of the future if you go it alone? As COVID has taught all of us, things that we never thought possible are possible. And your job as CEO is to really identify what those possibilities could be. You also want to take a good hard look at the competitive arena into which you're launching. Make sure that you are really, really putting yourselves as objectively as you can in a vantage point that looks at your proposition and really looks at it objectively. Will partnering give you a competitive advantage? If so, what kind of competitive advantage in which of the numerous functional areas it takes success in to actually launch and then succeed with a drug? Assessing these elements of your company and your business and the competition that you're going to be facing with a clear-eyed view is always really helpful. Even if you decide, I don't want to do a partnership right now, or even I'm never going to do a partnership, perfectly legitimate strategic choices, it doesn't hurt to start laying a foundation now. Everybody knows the world is all about networking. So identifying possible matches between your core strengths and offerings and opportunities and a target partner's core strengths is always a good idea. Match your strategic needs with a list of other strategic needs from other partners. Start keeping a list. It doesn't have to be an official one, but start doing so, because the truth is it takes a long time and it's really complicated to get to the final end of a deal sheet, a definitive agreement with another corporation. It can take months, even years it's taken to get from the first introductory calls all the way through to signing a partnership deal. And there's a number of reasons why. Your original contact at big BioPharma probably got promoted, or maybe they moved, or maybe they just shifted jobs or responsibilities. When that happens, you have to start all over again often with a new person who is their replacement. And it's also true that corporate strategies and management change over time. So you may do a lot of work and the strategy of the organization that you're working with might change, which is why it's always an incentive for you to ink a deal quickly. All of these ideas are things that you will probably be thinking about as you consider whether you want to get into some kind of a collaborative agreement with an outside party. And although it sounds kind of easy, like we're both interested, we're both come to the table, we should be able to ink something relatively quickly, even if you have all the tools of modern technology, it's not going to be that simple. Let me kind of illustrate this for you here. Getting to a definitive agreement and then to a healthy, well-functioning partnership is a complicated treasure map. You're going to go all over the place. First, you're going to really need to understand your company's strategic needs. And that's not easy. It takes a lot of self-reflection. You're going to review the landscape that's out there. You're going to see who you might want to hook up with and link into for a partnership deal. And you'll go around and around and around, and ultimately you'll probably come up with a short list of targets. Maybe you find your primary target, for example. So you found who you want to partner with. What do? Well, you have to figure out how to contact them, and you also have to figure out the strategic fit between the two of you. Let's say the strategic fit works. It's a perfect match. You reach out to them, you contact them. It probably takes 6 weeks to get a call back, but you do get a call back, and you start articulating the fit, just you and the one person you've connected with between you and that organization. You start building rapport with that contact person, and ultimately you're going to ask for a meeting where you're all going to come together, maybe a smaller team, to talk about the fit. It happens that it will often take numerous smaller sessions between one person from one company and another person until you actually get to a larger, broader meeting. Once you do, it's time to analyze the financials and really look at whatever is publicly available and start doing your diligence. And this due diligence process is absolutely critical. It is the most important component. A high quality due diligence process will deliver a high quality partnership. This is a part of the process where you're evaluating each other's information. You've probably entered a confidentiality agreement at this point, and you're looking to see after the first blush whether you really do want to connect with each other on a deeper level. You're going to get the lawyers involved. That takes a lot of time. And if you're lucky and you navigate all of these hurdles, you will sign a non-binding term sheet. This is basically a summary of everything that you've agreed to with them at a very, very high level. You're going to definitely want to be talking to your board before this and even after, continuing, because you're not done. You have to agree on the deeper deal terms. That includes governance and the financials and all of the legal obligations. That takes an extraordinary amount of work. Only then does X mark the spot and you're able to sign the definitive agreement. But unfortunately, it's not time to celebrate quite yet, because now you've got to operationalize it. You've got to populate a team. You have to operationalize the partnership. You're probably going to have to navigate a bunch of disagreements, at least at first, and only then are you actually going to routinize the partnership. So as you can see, it's a long, long journey. So how does the process typically start? Well, as I mentioned, you're going to have already gone through a strategic exercise or a number of strategic evaluations where you're thinking about the gaps you want to fill at your organization. You're going to build and maintain a list of target companies, and you're going to figure out how to connect with them. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Probably you're going to ask somebody in your network to introduce you. Once that happens, send a succinct but compelling email and do your very best just to have a quick conversation with someone on the other side of the phone line. If you're lucky and you get through that and you've been able to convince them that a meeting is worthwhile, pull together a 10-page non-confidential deck, maybe 15. This deck is what's going to entice the other party to come to the table. Share insights about your technology or your science. Make sure it's short, it's got to be engaging, and above all, persuasive. During the presentation and during every interaction you're having with the possible partner at this point, you're demonstrating credibility and confidence. You're also importantly demonstrating a willingness to collaborate, because that's what the person on the other end of the line or the people at the meeting are looking for. Can these people work collaboratively with people in my organization? As you have these conversations and meetings, listen for understanding. You should be looking for gaps in what they might be verbal, they might not be stated, but What are the gaps that the other party is looking to fill by linking up with you and initiating an alliance of some kind? Is there a way that you can help them achieve their short and their long-term strategic goals? What is it about your company specifically that entices them enough to spend time talking to you and learning more about what you offer them? Were there certain elements of your presentation? Were there elements of your website? Was it something about the scientific publications you've been able to get in the public domain? Was it simply the people you have on your team? All of these can be reasons to generate enthusiasm and interest on the part of the other party. In the end, though, it's really all about one thing. You want to progress from these introductory discussions to get to the MNDA stage, which is where you both sign a non-disclosure agreement that basically says that you're not going to reveal anything to other people beyond who is involved in this potential deal. You're going to get introduced at this point, or I mentioned before, you need to get introduced to these target partners, and it's not easy because many of them will not want to return your phone calls. It's possible that cold calls can work. I've seen it happen, but it's rare. So really, you've got to build and leverage your network and everyone at your company's network as well. And there's lots of ways you can do this. You should be publicizing your organization and growing it via communication techniques like LinkedIn or Twitter. Join professional organizations. There's lots of them. They're not all just scientific congresses or science groups. There's also lots of networking groups in the scientific domain, like the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association, Bio, for example. All of these organizations, you should be getting in there and really getting your name known and doing as much networking as you possibly can. I've seen people succeed with contacting their alma mater's alumni office. I've seen people succeed with asking social contacts to assist you. Believe it or not, I once even saw a time where someone asked his mother-in-law for a connection, and it did turn up and in a initial conversation with a potential partner. You've got a whole host of Y-Combinator peers going through this program with you, and peers who have gone through the program previously. They're all here and open and ready and willing to help you with connections and networking. One final comment about this. It's not so important that you find the right person, although eventually you do want to find that right person. It is at this stage of the game important that you find someone who is the person who will champion your company and your idea on the internal bureaucracy where they work. They're familiar with that bureaucracy. They're familiar with their own company. Inspire them so that they want to get you to become a part of their company's operating model and the stable of partnerships that they undoubtedly already have. At this point, you're really starting to get into due diligence in a serious way. You've got to populate your team. You've had initial conversations. You've decided that this is something of great interest. You've gotten to a non-disclosure agreement. You've got to build a team of people who are responsible for conducting all of the evaluations across all of these functions to evaluate whether or not a partnership with this opposing party is worthwhile. By the way, the opposing party will also have a deal team populated with all of these functions. And the truth is that all of those people will be full-time employees of that company. And they probably have been involved in numerous deal teams. But don't worry, because you have an advantage as well. You've got the opportunity to bring in subject matter experts as consultants, advisors, folks that have perhaps a bit more experience in some of these areas. Maybe they've been involved in partnership due diligence before. Find them, use them, depend on them. That will help you equalize the team that you have and the team that your negotiating opposite partner has. So deal team structures typically mirror each other. And on the left-hand side here in the light blue, obviously you've got the board and company management and governance sort of above any deal team that is pulled together. If you're the originator and the licensor is over here, Your deal team, given the numbers of functions I mentioned earlier, gets pretty large, and you've really got to organize it well. So you're probably going to organize your team into maybe 3, 4, 5 separate groups. The technical team, those are the non-clinical, clinical, CMC people, maybe the regulatory people, perhaps information technology people. These are the folks that are really the subject matter experts on your side or on the opposing side, and they're the ones that are going to evaluate so much of the basic facts, information, evidence here. Your financial team is going to really dig into all of the tax implications, all the accounting work that needs to be done. They'll model all of the financials. They'll deal with investor relations in the future once the deal gets signed and announced. The commercial team will also be a part of this, and they play a vital role because they're going to be assessing whether they can actually not just get this product approved, which is really the job of the development and regulatory people, but whether they can commercialize it successfully, whether they can really drive patient uptake with your compound in a way that is significant for from the party's perspective, on the partner side, from their perspective. You're going to want to have people on your side as well who can go toe to toe with their commercial experts. Legal is obvious. What might not be obvious is that there's also what's called the core team. And these are the few people that interact with each other across company borders. So that'll be probably the business development leader or the search and evaluation assigned individual. Maybe it's the scientist on the team who is most deeply involved in assessing the research that you are presenting or the development plan that you're working on. It'll probably be a core team of maybe 3 to 5 people that is sort of sits above all of the other people that are underneath the team that will be working together, perhaps 30, 40, even 50 folks to assess the opportunity to do a deal. So how do you optimize all these interactions? Some of the interactions are going to be one-to-one, function to function. Some of them are going to be with lots of people. Some of them are just going to be the core leadership team. Well, the first and most important advice that I would give you is identify what is their interest in partnering with you. There's lots and lots of research and publications out there. You can learn, and you should learn, more about the company that you're looking to partner with than they even know about themselves. Figure out what their strategic focus areas are. What challenges do they have organizationally? What efficiencies or inefficiencies do they have? What are their financial needs? What's going on in the competitive fields in which they play? Are they trying to fill a gap somewhere, or are they trying perhaps to accelerate momentum in a winning area for them? Work as an internal team to share the conversations and the output of each of the meetings that the due diligence members are having. Really understand and analyze the observations that you're making during partnership discussions. Actually keep a formal log. It's a great idea to just keep a running list of the interactions that have happened with the other side, what the interaction was about, what the topic was discussed, and what were some of the issues, the concerns, or the delights that came out of that conversation. It's critical that you identify the key people involved in this deal. The key people you might actually never meet them. They might never come to the table. But certainly understanding who is driving the deal in the background is really vital to you. It might be a business person. It could be a scientific individual. It could be a finance guy. Really thinking about that and having a perspective on it, a hypothesis, is important for you. Next up is building relationships with the other side. You should assign your team individuals on the opposing side, one-to-one relationships. Assign them and make sure that your people are nurturing relationships in a way that brings information back to your table. And another way to organize yourselves is to do 2 types of pre-meeting preparation. The first is there will be a champion on the other side who really wants to make this deal happen. They will be the visible champion, and they'll be probably your primary contact. Whoever is the primary deal leader on your side should meet with that person before every single meeting. Talk about What are your expectations? What do you want to get out of this meeting? What are you trying to achieve jointly? How can you move both sets of teams forward in this negotiation process? Secondly, plan ahead of time with your own team. Practice. Make sure you're prepping in advance. Ensure that every single person on your team who attends a meeting with the other partner company understands exactly what they need to achieve, what role they play, and what their responsibility is to the meeting at hand. Once you get through that, you're on to non-disclosure agreements. The diligence takes place. You've formed your team. You're moving forward with sharing confidential information carefully. You're probably going to open what's called a data room. This is something that is an electronic set of file folders where the functional experts will go in, assess more detailed information on each side, and bring it back to the deal team with their conclusions. You've already, as I mentioned, identified your internal deal team. You've gotten to a point where probably all of the opportunities and concerns have been highlighted. You've shared questions with the opposing party, and you've probably gotten to a point that you've decided, yeah, we're all still interested or not. This is when you get to the stage of the process called the non-binding term sheet or the non-binding offer. This is a document, it's a short one, that incorporates the broadest possible understanding of the assets that you're discussing, the expectations that both parties have for the top line elements of any possible future deal, whether that's the financial terms, the agreement on certain concepts, and even if this is an offer that is non-binding, it's no less critical because this is the written summary upon which you will be assessing the partnership in the future, both parties. Your legal counsel will absolutely need to review this. Your board might want to see it. It is a document that really is the foundation of everything that comes afterward. And so you get through to this point, you've got a signed term sheet. Is it time to celebrate? Unfortunately, not quite yet, because there's still more. In your term sheet, you will have incorporated a host of financial elements. Here's just a few of them, but they're probably the most important ones. You will have agreed to an upfront payment, which is the cash, essentially, that one partner is giving to the other upon finalization of the deal terms. This is a really important number because Wall Street, future investors, others will be looking at this and making an assessment of how strong the partner's interest was in you. In addition to the upfront payment, there's going to be milestone payments, almost certainly. And these are payments that will be made from one partner to the other upon achievement of certain deliverables. And we're going to go through some of those in a moment. BioBucks is sort of industry slang. It's essentially the totality of all of the payments apart from the upfront payment that comprise the rest of any deal. So when you hear about a $1 billion deal with a $25 million upfront payment, your investment base, your investors and potential investors will think about that very differently than, for example, or perhaps a deal with a $150 million upfront with a $850 million in BioBucks. Royalties are paid from one party to the other. Typically, it's a percentage of your gross receipts, or it might be a payment on each unit sold. But these are ongoing obligations financially between the parties as the drug is commercialized and uptake happens. And one last really key concept is that of booked revenue. You will hear a lot about who books the revenue. And that's because booking revenue comes with a lot of rights and a lot of advantages, but also a lot of obligations and responsibilities. So make sure you fully understand the elements of the booking revenue concept, and that you have determined successfully based on your strategy what you need when it comes to that component of your deal. I talked briefly about milestones. There are so many different milestones out there. They can range from a filing of an NDA to a number of milestones. And typically there are a number of milestones that are part of a final definitive agreement. Perhaps it's the combination of initiating all of your clinical trials. Maybe it's generating your first approval in a major market worldwide. Maybe it's the first time that you are approved in a non-EU, non-North America country. All of these are milestones that are typically seen in typical definitive agreements. It's critical that you and your strategic team and your financial team get together and really think about which are the ones that are going to drive value for your organization in a way that you feel sure that you're going to be able to deliver on these so that you can acquire the value of the milestone payments or the bio bucks that come due to you, assuming you meet each of these milestones. Not every agreement will include all of these. In fact, most won't, but they typically involve a lot of them. This brings us to the definitive agreement. You've got a signed term sheet. You continue negotiations up and until you actually sign the definitive agreement, which runs from perhaps 75 to 150 pages long, depending on the deal. And this legal document outlines everybody's rights and responsibilities pursuant to the partnership. There's lots of different components to it, as you can see here. It's the important concept for you to really conceptualize is that diligence continues literally right up until signature. Nothing is final, even when it's final. It's not always final, but nothing's final until the definitive agreement is signed. Why? Because the context could change, the environment could change. You might face negotiation challenges, shifts in understanding can take place. All of this is happening while your deal team and your deal lead is trying to drive your organization to final signature. Patience at this point throughout this entire process is so important, and it's never more important than getting to the final signature. So hooray, now actually you can pop the champagne corks. You've gotten a signed agreement, you're officially legally in a partnership. Wonderful, congratulations. Don't take too long enjoying the champagne, because actually now you've got to operationalize it. And many companies that are smaller forget about this part, because the goal seems to be all encompassing to get to the deal, sign the deal. Actually, this is critical. Few tips or ideas for you to consider. Assigning accountability to a single person, typically called an alliance manager, is a very good idea, because your partner will have an alliance manager and you're going to need to have somebody on your side of the deal who is their primary point of contact. These two people, they are held accountable for making sure the partnership succeeds. Those two people in turn will be building a partnership team. These are the actual people that are going to do all the work, because once the deal team achieves its objective of getting an inked definitive agreement, they actually, the deal team dissolves and you bring in new people, often, not always, who come to the table, and they're the ones that are now on the long-term partnership team. So crafting a joint operating plan with the alliance manager on each side who works with their teams is mission critical, actually. Codifying the beliefs around expectations, team norms, values. It may sound like, oh, it's not very important, we can get to that later. This is absolutely critical. I've personally worked in partnerships where this was not done at first, and you can see the difference in the job satisfaction of the people involved on the long term, the success of the output. Spend time doing this. It's really about nurturing a culture of collaboration. leveraging the backgrounds of all of the people on the one team that is comprised of people from both companies. Building a key KPIs or metrics and then assessing progress toward them. And being transparent when tension crops up, because it will, and thinking very clearly about in advance, how are you going to handle disagreement? Typically, what you've written into your definitive agreement is a governance, maybe not a process, but at least governing bodies. So you'll probably have a joint steering committee, which is comprised of a few people on each side, probably one from development, maybe one from commercial, possibly one from finance, and perhaps the alliance manager on both sides, who are going to be the few people held accountable by the single partnership entity and by the management teams on both companies for making sure that the partnership achieves its goals. They're often the final arbiter of disagreements, although not always. I've seen disagreements go all the way up to the CEO. Typically, that's not a good idea. You want to push challenges and issues down to the lowest level and get them resolved there. You're almost certainly going to have a JDC, which is a few development people from each side of the partnership who will work together to build the development plan, move things along, and make sure that progress is made according to the timelines that were set out as the deal was being developed and delivered. And then you'll probably also have a joint commercialization committee. These are the business people from the companies that work together to make sure that they have shared plans on how the drug will be launched, how it's going to be commercialized, how it's going to be reimbursed, all of that work that happens once the approval from FDA or EMA or any other regulatory body occurs. So just before I close, there's a few realities that you should be thinking about as you enter this great unknown and navigate the world of alliances, partnerships, collaborations. The first is that as a startup, it's probable that your deal flow is going to be pretty low. You're not going to get that many opportunities to ink a deal. So how do you increase your deal flow? Generate external awareness about what you're doing. Build the network. Do whatever you can to get your name out there in a strategic way so that there are interested parties, usually search and evaluation individuals from big pharma, whose job it is to search for interesting partnerships with startups. Getting your name out there enables them to find you easier. On the other hand, assessing a possible deal takes a tremendous commitment. It will require resources beyond what you actually think they will take. It is a Herculean effort in terms of time as well as money, and the people that have to be brought onto a deal team, usually be asking them to do more than, just like any startup, more than their first, second, or third job. So it's important you focus. How do you focus? By going back to the beginning of our conversation, where you're going to spend a lot of time doing strategic analysis internally about what do you need to fill your gaps, but also externally, what target partners out there exist where you can really help them. Don't go, jumping all over the field like rabbits, trying to just test every possibility. Focus your energies. You're going to need outside help. As a small company, as a startup, you probably don't have the bandwidth of personnel, or even if you do have all those people, they probably don't all have the depth of experience of putting together a deal. Go out and find people who can help you. Consultants and advisors who have done this before, maybe done it on numerous occasions, who have attended the School of Hard Knocks and can help you avoid some of the challenges that they may have experienced during the deals that they tried to put together. Chief among equals is great legal advice. Your lawyer will be the one that is going to help you defend your IP, develop a partnership agreement that works for you. They're the ones that are vital to the successful completion of an agreement. And actually, they're vital to the successful operationalization of an agreement, because what they put down on paper has to live in real life. Make sure that you bring them in, consult with them, but also save for them because they can be more expensive than you think. A good lawyer can be between $350 and $600 an hour. And you're going to need a lot of legal advice to comb through 100 pages or so of a definitive agreement. Also understand that you might need to accept flaws. Your first deal will probably be an imperfect one. You're not going to be able to get every single thing that you want, but neither will the other party. That's what a negotiation is. It's all about understanding what you need, what they need, and making sure that the two of you fill each other's gaps well. The critical concept here is you need a first deal in order to move to the second and subsequent deals. So think about what's really important. What are the absolutely non-negotiable points that you've got to have? And what are the things that, boy, it'd be awfully nice to have, but maybe not absolutely necessary to have? Have a conversation about that as a team. Really hammer out what you're willing to give up on so that you can get